Chapter 20, Africans in the Age of the Atlantic Slave Trade. Okay, here we go. There's some unpleasant stuff coming, by the way. This is not pleasant stuff, but it's important that we learn about it, so here we go. Maybe not. Let me click the button. It's not clicking. Oh, there we go. Technology. Okay, so, oh gosh, really the first thing we just kind of got to get out of the way is this. African slave trade, man, it's been going on, it goes way back, like way back. I mean, we can look at old texts. I mean, in the Bible, we've got slaves with Moses and let my people go and all that kind of stuff, and etc., etc. But the short version here is that the vast majority of African slave trading happened within Africa for centuries and centuries and centuries before the slave trade that we know about when it comes to U.S. history. So let's just get into that, right? So the first Europeans that really started dealing with the slave issue, that would be the Portuguese. Remember the Treaty of Tordesillas? We're going to split the world in half. The Spanish are going to get this side, and the Portuguese are going to get that side. And the Portuguese side is the Africa side. So as the Portuguese are going to come down around the ear of Africa and then down around the tip of Africa down there, the Portuguese are going to start trading with the Africans. And they're going to see that the Africans have gold and salt and all sorts of things, but they also have labor. And so the Portuguese are going to be the first ones to do this. The Portuguese. And so the Portuguese are going to they're going to start there on the coastline, and then they're going to start moving into the interior part of Africa. We've already talked about the civilizations of the Songhai and Ghana and all those, and Mansa Musa and all that kind of stuff. The Portuguese are going to try to establish trading routes there, but they're also going to see that, hey, trading routes have already been established, and so let's see if we can use those already established trading routes and not have to go into the interior of Africa and let the Africans do that themselves. So that's kind of how that all kind of started. Okay, between 1450, I'm looking at my cheat notes right over here. Between 1450 and 1850, 12 million Africans are going to be shipped across with a survival rate of 85%. You're thinking, hey, 85%, wow, that's pretty high, until you start doing the flip side of that math. That 15% of the people died on the trip over here. So that's not good at all. Although we can also argue that 15%, yes, that's awful. Just, I mean, terrible, awful, evil. But more Africans actually died getting from point A to point B with regard to the interior of Africa to the slave coast to get on the ships, getting captured in the interior of Africa and dragged all the way to the coastline. That's where a lot of Africans died, just being captured themselves. Let's see, it says the volume of trade was after 1700. After 1700 was the biggest volume of trade with over 80%, and of course we know that in the United States that our first slave ship showed up in 1619, and so from that point on, so that's the 17th century, and so from that point on, after 1619, we're going to have slaves over here in the United, well, not states, that'd be the colonies, right? 40% of the slaves that are going to come from Africa are going to go to Brazil. Why would they go to Brazil? What's in Brazil? What is in Brazil? What is in Brazil? That's right, those of you who paid attention to the last film, the last video, sugar. That's what's in Brazil. 40% of the slaves are going to go to Brazil. And it says the high volume, I'm reading down here at the bottom, right there. High volume was important because the high slave mortality rate, which means death rate, of the Africans coming over here, they were not being replaced early on by children because the Europeans did not bring in a lot of females, and so a lot of people, that's not good. Okay, moving on. All right. We can name some of these famous forts, some of these famous slave villages, slave cities, slave towns. Elmina would be a big one today. And again, whoa, I went the wrong way on the little clicky thing. Elmina, Portuguese, right? We already did Portuguese. All right, so let's see. Early on, the Portuguese are going to start this off. The Portuguese, they're going to trade slaves. They're going to trade with iron bars. They're going to trade with brass rings. They're going to trade for slaves with cowrie shells. Anybody have a cowrie shell? I should have brought my cowrie shells to show you. They're little bitty, yeah, they're cool little shells. You can look up cowrie shell on the Google, and you can see how that works. Again, the slavers, the Portuguese, and later the French and the British and the Spanish, they're not going to go deep into Africa. They're going to allow the Africans to capture one another and bring them to the coastline to start. There at the bottom it says English traders made a profit. So let's talk about profits for a second. All right, a profit. How much you make versus how much you spend. If you make more than you spend, you make a profit. So we learn in economics that if you have a 5% profit, 5%. So you spend $100, you make $105. I don't like that light on me. You spend $100, you make $105. So 5% profit, right? Great. Yeah, your business is probably going to fail. That's a weak profit. 10% profit. 10% profit. Well, economics people, the economists, they're going to say 10% profit. Hey, you know what? That's about average. That's a good day. 10% profit. Your business is probably going to make it. You're going to go on and do wonderful things. 10% profit. Yay! 20% profit. Ooh, 20% profit. That's excellent. Man, if you can make 20% profit, that is excellent according to economic people, economists. I don't know why that word's not working in my head. Economists, 20% profit. So, in the United States in 2024, here are some of the highest profit margins. Ready? If you're a banker, bankers do really well. They're like they're in the 30% profit range. Bankers, 30%. That's pretty good. Shoes, women's shoes in particular, 42% profit. 42% women's shoes. But here's one that kind of surprised me because I just looked this up. An industry that, if you want to get into it, make a lot of money. Snow plowing. That's right, snow plowing. So maybe not, where we live in Oklahoma or down here in Houston, snow plowing. But up there in the northeast, ooh, yeah, snow plowing. Huh. Okay. Well, that's what the Google said, so it must be true. Oh, so why is that a big deal? Because you look there at the bottom of the PowerPoint. 300%. 300% profit for slaves. 300%. 20% is excellent. They made 300% profit. Very lucrative. Evil, lucrative. We've already kind of seen one of these maps, and so you see from, I'm doing this backwards because I'm looking at a screen that's backwards here, so the United States, North America. Oh yeah, we're not the United States yet. North America, well, we will be, and we're going to give to Europe the orange line. And so we have whale oil and lumber and furs and rice, silk, indigo, tobacco. That's the big one. Sugar, molasses, and wood. And we're going to give all of that. We're going to sell that to Britain. And remember, mercantilism. You wrote that word down, I'm sure, at some point. Mercantilism. That's where we give the mother country, Britain. We're going to give them all the raw materials, and then they're going to sell it back to us once they've created stuff. So it says right here, manufactured goods and luxuries. And so that's mercantilism. We give them the raw stuff, and they sell it back to us for a profit. You also see the yellow line that goes from England down to Africa, down here, down to the slave coast. We call that the slave coast right there. And it says Europe is going to give to Africa guns, clothing, iron, and beer. Okay. And then what do we get from Africa? Africa, we get slaves. Although there is a pink line that goes up to Europe, and it says gold, iron, spices, and hardwood is going to come from Africa. And then, like I said, here we go. The African slaves are going to come up to the colonies up here, and not just down here's Brazil. There's Brazil, and then out here into the islands where all the sugar plantations are. There's islands right there, and then up here, and there's Charleston, and just above Charleston, we've got all the tobacco farms up there in Maryland and Virginia and North Carolina and South Carolina. So that's all the tobacco farms. And yes, I know you're thinking, what about cotton? What about cotton? What about cotton? Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. Anything else? I think that's all I want to talk about for that. Why is that going backwards like that? Oh, because I'm clicking the other side. That makes sense. Huh. Interesting. Technology. Man, you gotta love it. You know, back in the day, nope, don't have time. Give me a chalkboard. I'll just do this on chalkboard. Early on, slaves were not, slave traders were not into enslaving women. And so, what are you going to do with the women? A lot of polygamy going on. Polygamy is having more than one wife, etc., etc. And so, Africa itself did not really start selling Africans. Africa did not start selling to Africans until really the 1700s, the early 1700s, when they start making lots of profit on that. Okay. Right click. So here's our map, and we've already talked about Ghana. That was Mansa Musa, and remember he made all that gold, and he's going to come up here and he's going to destroy the world's economy. We've got Mali, which is a little bigger, and you got Songhai, which is a little bigger than that. And we talked about those before. But for the purposes of this PowerPoint, now the power is not going to be up here, up here. The power's not going to be there, where they have the gold and the salt and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be down here. What do we call that? It's the Sahel. Remember the Sahel? Check that out. It's going to be, the power's going to be down here on the slave coast. And so we got a couple of new countries. We have Asante, and we have Dahomey, and Oyo, and Benin. And they are going to be the ones that are going to sell the slaves that they steal from up here. So these groups are going to take slaves from up here and then put them on ships and go make some money. Okay. So just talk about each one real fast, like real fast. Like we're halfway done with this PowerPoint, so real fast. All right. So the Asante, the Asante, big, also called the Gold Coast. Today we call it Ghana, by the way. Started with Osei Tutu. And he's going to call himself the Asante Hene, the supreme leader. And his symbol is this golden stool, which you see right there. And he's the current is carrying the golden stool back behind his shoulders there. The golden stool, according to legend, came out of heaven. God dropped it from heaven in a bunch of white powder. And there it is, the golden stool. And so the leader, the Asante, he gets to sit there on the stool and make pronouncements. And there's their flag, kind of an interesting yellow, black, and green, and they've got the little golden stool right there. You know, before the golden stool showed up, their flag had, I believe it was the same colors, and instead of the golden stool, it had a porcupine and a cocoa bean. I think that would be cool, a porcupine. Anyway, what were we talking about? Oh, the golden stool has look up, take some time, go Google the War of the Golden Stool. We had this British guy who came out and he was like, no, 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 hey, you know what, we're taking over this entire place because you're going to be one of our colonies. And the queen would like to, to sit in the Golden Stool. So where is it? Because I'm going to borrow it. And then the Asante, they did not take kindly to this British guy demanding to sit on the Golden Stool. Why are we talking about this? 2/3 of the gold, there at the bottom, this is the important part. The Dutch made connections with the Asante by 1700, and slaves, which is 2/3 of their trade, golly, 67%, and gold became the major exports all the way up until the 1820s. The 1820s, man, that was like that was like, I was about to say James Madison. That was like James Monroe, President Monroe. That was President Adams. That was President Andrew Jackson, 1928. It's 1828. Okay. Wow. Okay. Moving on. Is that the next one? It is the next one. Benin. So Benin, already kind of well established. They're kind of there in the corner there, and they already had an economy that was going, that was not really slave based. It was more gold based. And then the British, is that right? The Europeans, doesn't tell me. I should look that up. The Europeans are going to show up and they're going to say, hey, slavery. And the Beninese are going to go, well, if it makes money, okay. And then Benin's going to get involved in this. Today, we still have the country of Benin. I pulled up pictures of Beninese art from Benin, and we get these pictures, and you see the people with the neck rings, right? The neck rings, and that's still kind of a thing. It's still kind of a thing in some parts of this area. Those neck rings are kind of interesting. It's considered beauty to have a very long neck, to have a long neck. Please note that you have, like, all right, I did not look this up. Do not tell Mrs. Jones if I get this wrong. You have like seven. I'm going to go with 7. You have like 7 bones in your neck, right? The cervical bone. Yeah, I think that's right. 7 bones in your neck. Well, you can't make them longer. And if you make your neck longer, then your children's necks are not going to be longer, because that's not how that works. Lamarck tried to prove that, and then what's his name? The guy on the Beagle, the HMS Beagle, Darwin, that guy. Darwin said, no, Lamarck, you're wrong. Necks don't grow like that. So giraffes don't do that. Okay, why are we even talking about that? It appears if you look at some of the pictures, if you type in African neck rings, elongated necks, it appears that some of these women have very long necks. Well, they don't. It's an optical illusion. In fact, it's not very. It's kind of yucky. What they do is they put the rings on their neck, and then when they're able to, they add another one. But it's not. It doesn't make their neck extend. It didn't make their neck extend. What's going on is they start these little girls at like 12 years old. They start putting neck rings on, and so as the girls are growing, the neck rings, because they're heavy, they're like 7 pounds each or something like this. Pretty crazy. Start to push down on the collarbone. Start to kind of dig into the collarbone. The collarbone starts to, the clavicle, starts to go into like a 45-degree angle in like that, and so then they're able to put more and more rings on there, which pushes the collarbone down further and further. So from the outsider's point of view, it looks like the person's neck is long, but no, their torso is being caved in. So I don't know if that's. We already talked about Chinese foot binding. Okay, yeah. Okay, moving on. Dahomey. Today we call this Togo. Let me look at the map. Where are we? Let me look at that. Dahomey. Today we call this Togo. Ish. Part of Benin. Maybe kind of part of Nigeria, actually. Okay, more Togo. I'm going to go with that. Dahomey, by the 1700s, a big influence in the Europeans. The Europeans are going to come down there with guns and say, hey, guns, just get us some slaves. Guns, guns, guns. And they were like the perfect poster child of slavery in Dahomey, where they would go into the center of Africa and they'd grab slaves and they'd bring them out to the coast, and then they would sell them to the Europeans and make lots and lots and lots of money. Dahomey has a lot of civil wars going on, and a lot of men. A lot of their African tribesmen are going to die in these civil wars, and so at one point the queen or the king, depending on which source you look at, are going to ask for women to join the army. And so we have two pictures here of the all-female army, or a division of the all-female army. And when the British showed up, I want to say the British. It sounds like something. No, you know what? I think it was the French. Maybe, I don't know. It's going to be the French at the end of the story. But the Europeans showed up and they're like, ooh, all-female army. That doesn't happen too terribly often. Like never. I mean, when in world history was there an all-female army? It's like, well, here. And so then the Europeans are like, wait, we've heard stories of an all-female army. They're called the Amazons. Oh, right, the Amazons. The Amazons helped Achilles fight the war in Troy. And then Hercules had to steal the belt of the Amazons. And then, right. Who's the most famous? Who's the most famous Amazon that you know? Who's the most famous Amazon that you know? I know you're thinking Hippolyta. I knew you were thinking Hippolyta, because she's the one who owned the belt that Hercules had to steal so that he could then what was he doing? Why was he stealing the belt? Oh, he was stealing the belt because he killed his wife and children. Did you know that about Hercules? This is not the time to be talking about Hercules. Anyway, you were thinking of the most famous Amazon. You were thinking of Princess Diana, weren't you? Princess Diana. She was a wonder. She was a wonder. A woman who is a wonder. Anyway, the Europeans, they saw this all-female army, and they're like, oh, we're going to call you the Amazons. And the Amazons were, they did bodyguard duty, and they did war duty, and they did all sorts of duty, in fact. And then they would go out and they'd plant crops. And they were a menace to society, all the way up to like the early 1900s, I want to say. Yes, yeah, in the early, like late 1800s. And then the French showed up. Maybe it was the early 1800s. I want to say the late 1800s. And the French showed up, and the French were like, we cannot have women carry guns. This is not right. Women in the army? No. Napoleon, he would never allow women. And so they disbanded. Yes, that was my awful French accent. Down south, where are we? It's so hard to do this backwards. On this part of Africa, down the southeast corner of Africa, we call that the Swahili states. We've already talked about that. The Swahili states, they are not going to get involved in the African slave trade that goes to the New World. They're going to do some trade, actually, with the Middle East. And so specifically, I think my camera's about to fall. Has it been slowly sliding? I just noticed this. How weird. Oh, now it really messed it up. There we go. Okay, don't slide on me. Are going to sell women to the harems up there in the Middle East and up there in India. And so the slaves that are going to come from the Swahili states, they're going to go work on the islands, out here like Comoros, and there's the Seychelles up there. but you see the arrows are going to go up here to the Middle East, and we're going to have lots of women are going to be slaves there. Down at the bottom of the map, which is down at the bottom of the map here is South Africa. The name of the country, by the way, South Africa. Where is it located? South Africa. That's going to be the Dutch. So the Dutch are going to, well, it's originally the Portuguese, because remember the Portuguese owned that side of the world because of the Pope and the Treaty of Tordesillas. And so the Portuguese are going to come around the corner there, but then the Dutch are really going to take over South Africa. The Dutch are they're not going to be involved in the slave trade as much down in South Africa, because they're actually going to try to form a little civilization down there, the Dutch. In fact, they're going to try to kind of break away from Europe themselves. We're going to call them the Afrikaners. We're going to call them the Boer. They are going to be involved in slavery, but it's like internal slavery. And then they're going to have to deal with this guy, Shaka Zulu, the Zulu tribe, and I think we're going to talk about them later, but Shaka Zulu, he's going to get himself all fired up about slaves and the Dutch down there, and so he's going to cause some problems. Hey, good for him. Okay. All right. So the Middle Passage, that's what we call it, the Middle Passage. So once the slaves get on the boats and they start coming across the Atlantic, they're going to come over here to Brazil, they're going to come over here to the Caribbean islands, they're going to come over here to the southern, I was about to say United States, but nope, the southern colonies, which ultimately will be the southern United States. But yeah, it's awful, it's awful. There's been a lot of films made on this. If you ever get a chance to go see the La Amistad, oof, it's a movie by Steven Spielberg. It is worth your time. It's worth your time. We talk about that when we do AP Government, because it's a pretty important case. You know, in the Constitution, okay, this is important. In the Constitution of the United States, it says we will not import, I'm banging my fist on the table, we will not import slaves, although they don't actually use the word slaves. It's kind of weird how they say it. But we will not import slaves after the year 1809. So no new slaves after the year 1809. That's in the Constitution of the United States. And some of you in here, you're doing the math and you're like, no, wait a second. The Civil War didn't start till 1861. So if the last slaves came over in 1809, then how did, what? 1861? That seems like that's there are a whole bunch of people who broke the rules. That's the short version of that. Okay. Yeah, we know, and again, this is awful, and we'll spend a lot more time with regard to its awfulness when we do AP US history. Ugh, that's, ugh. But we have different levels of slavehood, I suppose. We have those that work on the fields, we have those that work in the house, we have those that work in the mines. Golly, it's just so awful. We have kind of like last video, we talked about the Creoles versus the Peninsulares versus the mulattoes, and we have that situation going on as well. We have the mulattoes, which are half European, half black. We have the saltwater slaves, which are pure African, and then all the different versions of that. So we have a caste system going like that as well. Oh, it's just a nightmare. Rebellions. Oof. So you know what? Good for them, right? Rebellions are common in some places. There's going to be a pretty big one in Haiti. We're going to have a couple here in the United States in the 1820s, 30s, and 40s, and it's going to get some people's attention. And well, we'll get to that later, right? And so, good for them. The slaves are going to bring their own culture over here, and then we're going to have a mishmash. They're going to bring songs, they're going to bring their religion, they're going to bring their language, they're going to bring their dress, and and we're going to mishmash that all up together and really get ourselves a uniquely American culture from all of that. All right. Well, the good news is that at some point there were some people who were like, wait a second, this ain't right. This is actually like awful. Yeah. Welcome to, right? So we call this, this is part of the Enlightenment period. Enlightened. People, let's see, how would you define the Enlightenment period? The Enlightenment period is when people started to realize, hey, one, people are people. treat them as people. And then the other side is people need to start thinking. They need to start thinking. That's a short version of that. We're going to get to more enlightenment. We're going to do a whole thing on the Enlightenment, so that'll be exciting. But the Enlightenment period is about the time that, so in the late 1800s, the late 1800s, we're going to have people who are going to pop up. Well, really even before that, because we got people like Rousseau in the late 1700s, and Adam Smith, etc. But this idea, even Thomas Jefferson. You know Thomas Jefferson, he was a slave, President number 3, right? Declaration of Independence signed. President Jefferson, he said, I'm paraphrasing, he was talking about slavery, and he says, and I don't remember the exact quote, but he basically said, imagine Thomas Jefferson riding on the back of this very large wolf, a giant wolf. And so he's riding and he's holding the ears. There's no reins, there's no steering, he's just holding the ears of this wolf, and the wolf is trying to buck him off, right? And so he writes to his friend and he says, I feel like we're holding the ears of the wolf, and obviously we can't hang on, because if you hang on to, to the ears of the wolf, that just makes the wolf madder, and the wolf will bite you and kill you if you continue to hold on to its ears. And Jefferson says, but here's the problem: if we let go of the ears, the wolf will bite and kill us. And so what do we do? And the whole metaphor, the whole thing was all about, maybe it's an allegory, no, I guess more of a metaphor, of the wolf being slavery. And so, even though he was a slave owner, speaking of enlightenment, he's kind of an enlightened guy. Religious people, religious humanists, John Wesley, William Wilberforce, are going to start pushing stuff in the late 1700s, early 1800s. In 1807, interesting enough, in 1807, British outlawed slave trade. The British, they were way ahead of their time. The British were doing that, and they looked down at us and were like, you Americans, and we did what we did. So there's a couple of, this is a anti-slave society drawing. This is a political cartoon of one member of the House of Representatives beating one member of the Senate on the floor of Congress in Washington, D.C., tried to beat his brains in because one guy was a pro-slave and one guy was an anti-slave. And then over here, a very famous AP US History political cartoon, we've got the Democrat Party. Let's see, is that closer to me? The Democrat Party over here, and they're holding this guy's head back, and they're forcing the slave down this guy's throat. This guy's a free soiler, and so he believes in no slaves, no new states having slavery. And so, yeah, American history. Right. I wonder what's going to happen in 1861. No, I mean, I don't wonder. I think we all know. But, okay. Oh, wow. See, I told you it was, well, actually, were we halfway? Okay. So the 6 themes, right? Government, African governments, ideas, well, the golden stool, right? I mean, there's also the whole thing about slavery. Economics, hey, profit margin. Slavery, snow plowing. Do not equate the two. Gender and social, human and environment, and technology. Okay, guys, this was a short one. Well, that's all I got to say about this. Slavery. Yuck. All right, be good.